What's going down, Nvidia fam? As we look into where the 471 series is going, we have a new driver for me to test out and showcase the patch notes and some benchmarks for new people. Hit the subscription button, get excited, and accompany it with a notification bell so you get all the new future Nvidia news along with everything else that's technologically in that niche that I cover. But for everyone returning, what's going down, everyone? Slam that like and let's go ahead and see what is up with the brand new 471.41. Man, does it compare to the 11? We're gonna find out. Now there's a brand new PDF always accompanied with what is more simply put on Reddit. It breaks it down just a little bit easier. So looking at this, the game Ready Driver is going to provide some support. That is for some new titles and updates in the latest portions of Red Dead Redemption 2. On top of that, you can see where the Chernobylite, which introduces the Nvidia DLSS technology. So we're going to be looking at some very robust pictures and memes coming out. That's pretty cool that they continue to update that and try to iron that out. Now, if they could get some network connections, that's a whole other story for Rockstar. And moving to the applications, you can see that July in the Nvidia Studio driver, it also performs a optimal support for the latest creative application. So the Unreal 4.27 and the Unity, the 21.2 beta. So Inkscape 3.1, and top of that we have some other programs that you could run down and see exactly what is on that list. That goes from anywhere from AI to Discord to Nvidia in their Omniverse. So looking at some of the newer valid G-Sync compatible screens, Samsung joins 2 on the list for as far as the LS28AG700N, and you also have the LC27G50A. On top of the what is actually going to be on the fixed notes, which is really cool. And they do have some open issues. I encourage everyone to read down below. You can see some workarounds, as we can see that what has actually been ironed out inside of this is the hardware accelerating where it stops. Yes, inside of the Capture One. Now disabling for as far as the HUD filters inside of games and like Valorant. Also on top of Doom, you have a game that may freeze during gameplay. League of Legends also comes down to a point where it may fail on launch, and HDR in the mouse cursor may shift when connection inside of the DSC monitors on top of the HDR models. On top of the DOF filter blur in the entry screen, for as far as where some games were being affected by this, the display screen also had resolution limited down to 640 and the 840 during updates. And looking at where we could see for as far as the HDMI 2.1 and 8K, for as far as the audio playback may become distorted after changing the display modes. On top of the RDP, we see that the remote desktop control in that connected portion with colors in the 10-bit would result in some corrupt pictures. GPU inside of the HDMI audio dropouts may occur when connected inside of the LG C9 OLED TV. Something that no longer will be an issue, hopefully. But leave a comment down below. As you can see, Arkham Knight, that's been on there for a good second for that smoke issue, has there been a reoccurring off and on issue. But what we're going to be doing is looking at the actual physical benchmarks now to run a synthetic comparison on 3D Mark. That way we can digest kind of like how it plays out the field. Now yes, this will play into the portion of, you know, some titles are going to be more favorable, some are going to be better when you update your Windows, and accompany that with the hardware accelerator off and or on. This is a basic middle of the road to kind of get the what was the progression inside of the driver. Now the ecosystem of game development, that's a whole other story, but that's what I always say before you freak out on these things. Make sure you just toggle off and on your graphics accelerator that you normally have inside of your Windows. On top of that, hit a reset, reboot the game in, and give it a shot. A lot of times that will fix a lot of errors, and make sure that your GPU third-party software, if you're utilizing it, like Precision that I utilize for my Nvidia, like 2080 Ti as well as the 1060, in order to perform overclocks, fans, as well as just RAM and increasements with inside of the actual physical use of it. Now each game is going to have its limits, but that's just a basic breakdown before we get into the actual benchmarks. As we take our first glimpse into the DirectX 12 world and consume pixel for pixel if there is some performance inside of the driver, well, when you look at hardware accelerator off to on in the new driver to old driver, yeah, but if you're going from hardware accelerator off to off, well, there's going to be a reduction. And the same thing with an on, where there's a huge reduction in comparison for numbers, not necessarily for the percentage of what performance we'd be getting inside of an actual benchmark. So we can see the actual performance running to is the old driver hammered out with the Windows framework that has been issued to work well with the older driver. So it's like sometimes it is kind of like a rustic wine, even with AMD, you know, not always the rush to update stuff. But if you have that title or you have those, you know, afflicted issues, then that's why you update, and then you deal with some, you know, optional bugs. But hey, you're here, and let's go ahead and see what ends up happening with 1080p, because we've already sized up the extreme version of Time Spy and the DirectX 12 family for 4K. This is where you start to see where the percentage again doesn't change, but the performance does take a kick back, where it was comfortably sitting over the 1200 in graphics in the older driver with the hardware accelerator on. Even with it off, if you toggle back in there, it might have some actual like synchronization and fixes as they ironed out as they built upon that. Now if you look at the newer ones, it goes below that. So let's go ahead and take a peek at Port Royale and see what ends up happening. Now, for most people that are curious for as far as the referenceable point is, our hardware accelerator on is on the top, off on the bottom, and when you go up to the very old driver, you're going to look to the left, new driver to the right. When we look at our ray tracing and the tensor core is going to work, that yes, there is a still trending continuation of it dropping down just a tiny bit, and this time actually with a percentage. The old driver with the hardware accelerator on very well exceeds by 2%, so it's balanced to like say that like now DirectX 12 and ray tracing will favor hardware accelerator on most titles. Now looking at DirectX 11 and now in the 4K territory of where we would like to dice up some pixels, we can see that, well, it seems like hardware accelerator off is just going to beat it by a tiny bit. Comparatively to where we look at the newer driver where it syncs across the board either with it on or off. Now again, percentages are not breaking. It's not like Port Royale where we saw actually a reduction, but if you are playing a title with a ray tracing enabled, then you are probably going to run into some issues unless you're on the older driver with the hardware accelerator on. So kind of one of the cooler tips of the trade is just, you know, trying to toggle off and cross out process of elimination of the performance and therefore figure out what's wrong, because sometimes it's just Windows and their ecosystem playing well or being ironed out by a third-party software. It's confusing, I know. The ecosystem's like Pokemon, they just keep adding more and more to the reel. Now when we take a look at the 1080p, take a step away from the normal department of 4K DirectX 11, we can see the same trend. And in fact, the only thing that changes is really that the hardware accelerator on in 1080p seems to be consistently a little stronger. Not a lot, but a little more stronger. But how's that size up with just a regular Fire Strike? The middle of the road for most gamers. Now when you look at what ends up happening here, you can kind of see what, well, it's almost like a dead tie until you get to this one point in time. It favors, if you're not using a lot of heavy settings and you're wanting a new driver, it definitely does persistently in the performance level. It's not too shabby, like when you look at that, but again, not percentage breaking. As you can see, it's taking a good stance around the 90 percentile. But when you look at like where our performance goes for graphics, it's just more of a tandem run where the combined like physical scores are starting to get a little bit more stronger with the CPU and the awesomeness of your CPU GPU. Yeah, that's the fun stuff, you know, it gets ironed out in like updates, because sometimes that's what ends up, you know, blocking like literally Destiny. That was an issue for a while, like, yeah. poor Ryzen processors, or you know, the situation of what ends up happening with like the portion of like Red Dead and like a majority of GPUs that were out there in the market, not just to target like one gaming company. But that's pretty much it, everyone. So at the end of the day, should you install this? Well, if you're playing your basic games and you had a lot of those bugs that were on the list that are fixed, then yes, I encourage. But if you have something that works, and you know what, don't worry about it. If something happens where game performance because of a new game that installed out of nowhere starts acting weird, then yeah, update your Windows alongside with, you know, constantly, I would like to say, because that the ecosystem, they need updates all the time. But like on top of the GPU, then update that GPU like on tandem with it, so that way you're just kind of getting like the optimal performance of like the jumping patterns. But if it's a fresh update, you can kind of wait maybe like a week or two if you have a good deal going, you know. No reason to break that. But I'll see you guys and gals in the new future. If you're newer to the network, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys and gals there. Stay safe, stay classy, and hopefully one of these days maybe Jensen will actually send me like, you know, like a 4090. That'd be cool, Jensen. I'll take it, like with 48 gigs of RAM, non, like, you know, light hash rate. I'd like mine full throttle, baby. I want that, you know, V48 RAM machine. Be amazing. Dream it, you know. You gotta make it possible somehow. Anyways, everyone, stay safe, stay classy. See you there.